So officially, good afternoon. My name is Jo Keeler and I am in the Belbin office. I'm delighted to be in the office. I decided I could no longer work from home and have decided to come in. I have a massive space all to myself, which is rather marvellous. So what we're going to be doing over the next 45 minutes to an hour is we're going to have a conversation with this gentleman here, Chris Jackson, who I have known for many years. And we always have, I think, far-ranging, wide, interesting, curious conversations. So I thought it would be great if you could all join in too and get a feel for Chris's views on teams, team coaching and the future of teams. Now, before we get started, I have to do a little bit of housekeeping. We will ask you to use the Zoom chat if you may. So if you have any questions at all throughout our conversation, I will be keeping an eye on the chat. So please do right away and I will try and get as many of your questions to Chris as possible. Apologies if I don't, it will just be a timing issue as opposed to anything else. We've also got a lot more webinars planned over the summer, so please do make sure that you keep your eyes open for any emails that come along. We've got one planned for the beginning of July, which will be involving Rona Gibson from Aberdeen University, talking about how her students have been using, Chris, you'll like that, using Belbin, and to help them on their next steps through their Leadership Academy into the world of work. As and when we confirm other people, we will let you know. Okay, so I'd like to say let's just get going, but let's just hang on 1 second. I have here a team circle where we have all these 9 team roles, these 9 clusters of behaviour. We have those social roles here, action and thinking. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put my name in the segments of my top 3 team roles. I have 3 really clear strengths when it comes to team roles. I have 3 and then I have nothing. Okay, so I'm going to put my name here. Actually, you can't see that, can you? Let me find a different coloured pen. Okay, we have me here in resource investigator, shaper and coordinator. So these are my 3 top strengths, which won't be a surprise to any of you who know me. Chris, come on.
Well, as no surprise to you, Jo, yeah, we share 2, which are shaper and resource investigator. And then I am also very high plant.
You are indeed. So before we go any further, if people would like to type in the chat, how do you think, in theory, this conversation would go? What is the relationship between myself and Chris, and what is it going to look like when we start chatting? So we have both of us a resource investigator, we both have shaper, I have coordinator, Chris has plant. So would anybody like to hazard a guess to how this conversation might play out? Thank you, Chris. I like that one. Fighting for control, absolutely. Okay, Chris will take it anywhere and you will try and control him. Yeah, quite astute there, Neil, normally. Exploration of ideas, Judy. Oh, hi, Gary. Some competition. Julia, Chris will have the ideas. Absolutely. Isn't it great how we know team roles and you can already get a feel, even though you don't know us personally, or some of you don't know us personally, is that you can already get a feel for how this conversation will go. It would be of no surprise to you, I'm sure, that Chris and I have already discussed this. And we've decided that what would be a really good idea is if I just dropped my resource investigator and shaper role and played the more coordinator role to field some more your questions in, to listen and to probe a bit more where we need some more clarification perhaps, and then just let Chris go full plant resource investigator shaper. What that does mean, however, I will play the shaper role when it comes to timing, Chris, okay? So I will get a bit bossy if we start running out of time at the end, I will let you know. But I always think it's really interesting to do this before you have any meeting or before you do anything, just to get a flavour for what the potential pitfalls could be and also the potential advantages, because one thing I'd like to think, Chris, it won't be is boring. Okay, what has Michael said there? Lots of connections to other meetings. Start and finish on time, and some new insights, absolutely, some new insights into teams. and to Belbin. Do you know, there's no pressure at all, Chris. I hope you're not feeling any at all.
I'm just about to run out of the door.
No, please don't. Please don't. I don't want to do this by myself. I did the last lot and it was, yeah, I need you with us. So, Chris, you describe yourself as a merchant adventurer. Please tell us a bit more about yourself, your background, and what are you currently up to?
Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chris Jackson, and I use the term merchant adventurer because for me, life this far has just been one big adventure. Although I now work in higher education, I'm a senior lecturer and team coach at the university in Lincoln at Bishop Grosseteste University, where I am program lead for the team entrepreneurship program there, but we'll come back to that later. Before that, I had always, from an early age, run my own enterprises, and everything I've done has been really based on a spirit of adventure. And probably the businesses that I have built have been more lifestyle businesses. Certainly latterly they were, where I was looking for a way of living as well as just an income. But all of the businesses that I have built have been built around and depended upon small teams. I first came into touch with the notion of Belbin over 20 years ago now, when it was missold to me as something that you could possibly use as a management cosh. So it wasn't something that you really shared or that you really talked about. It was something that you used to find out what the people who worked for you were like. And then you knew which buttons to push to get the best out of them. I'd like to say I now think differently. I'd also like to say that I think that when Meredith first came up with this insight, he was probably ahead of his time. A real forward thinker who could see the potential of teams. And this is now mirrored in emerging literature. Sorry, I'm sounding like an academic, which is shocking. This isn't good. But a lot of emerging literature, which I have to keep my nose in, talks about the emergence and the future importance of teams. Deloitte said back in 2017 that organizations of the future will be governed by networks of teams. What on earth does that mean? It's lovely language. It's a golden opportunity for Belbin. So that's kind of me so far. I currently, as I say, I'm program lead for this academic program. I work for the university 4 days a week. The program is really interesting because it's based on an idea that came out of Finland called Tiimi Akatemia, or Team Academy, which some of you may have heard of. And this came about over 25 years ago when a guy called Johannes Partanen, who was a lecturer in marketing, realized that he was fed up of sitting in front of a sea of bored faces talking about marketing. And he thought, I've got to do something different. I need to engage these young learners. So he put up a notice which said, how would you like to travel the world and learn about marketing on the way? And suddenly people were interested. And this is the genesis of Team Academy, and the whole philosophy of this way of learning is that you learn as a team. And the young people who come to us to do the degree course, from the moment they start until the moment they end, they work, or they learn to work as teams. Mm-hmm. They find out that doing so is hard work. They find out that it doesn't always work, but they find out that when they hit the sweet spot, if they ever find it, working and learning as a team can be an incredibly powerful thing. And that's where I am today, working as a team coach, not a lecturer. Thanks,
Chris. You can talk about team coaching, the team coach. What exactly? It's quite buzzy at the moment, isn't it, team coach? What do you see that as? How would you define it?
Well, that's really interesting, Joe. As you'll see from the grey hairs, I've been around for a little while now. And when I was, my first business, which was in the service sector, back in the 1990s, I got involved in delivering business support, and what was then known as Business Link. We'd been using them with our business. And Business Link said to me, "Oh, would you like to do some consultancy for us?" And I thought, "Oh, that sounds pretty sexy. Everybody wants to be a consultant." And this was back in the black and white days in about 1996, not long after the genesis of Belbin, really. But I started to do some private work for Business Link and then other organisations as a business consultant, because let's face it, in the 90s, everybody wanted to be a consultant or an advisor. Then with the turn of the millennium, becoming a mentor was the thing to be. So everybody wanted to be a mentor. Now we are sort of 2020-ish, where we are now. Everybody wants to be a coach. Coach this, coach that, life coach, business coach, team coach. And there are really interesting distinctions. And there's nothing new about coaching. There's nothing new about mentoring. Mentoring goes back to the ancient Greeks. But it's the process of coaching which I think is the interesting thing. And there are some shared tools, methods, philosophies throughout the whole range of coaching. But a life coach is not a sports coach, is not a business coach, is not a team coach, and neither am I as a team coach, a sports coach, or a life coach. The process, I do coach individuals one-to-one, I have to be able to do that, but as a team coach, you coach the whole team as a unit. But not just the team present in the room, but also their stakeholders in the environment that they serve. So suddenly you've got a visible team and an invisible team. Does that answer your question?
Oh, crikey. I think so. So what you're saying is you don't work on a one-to-one basis. You look at the team as a whole. So are you there to give advice to the team? I mean, what do you give to the team? What is it that you give to them, whether or not they're there or not there? And how do you manage when they're not there as well? I mean, that's a...
Ooh, lots of questions coming. Lots of questions come back from me. Right, one thing at a time. What advice do I give to the team? None. Okay. Very little at all. Now, none is a bit of a glib response, if you like, because as with so many other things, people have to, just as people have to learn what a team is and how to become a team, they've also got to learn how the process of team coaching works. And with working with young people, say between about, in general, between 18 and 23 in university, a lot of these guys come from schools and colleges where they've always been told what to do, what to think, where to sit, when to show up, when to go home, all of this. And when they come to us, we say, right, hi guys, you're here to learn about business. That's fantastic. Good to see you all. Well, what you're going to do over the next 3 years is learn how to work as a team and learn about teamwork. And if you want to learn about business, the best thing you can do is go away and set one up. Off you go. And then you look at the horror on some of the faces. Well, what do I need to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my reply would be, what do you think you could do? Well, and 9 times out of 10, they already have the answer. And one of the things about team coaching and the way that we deliver this program is that I believe that they are the experts. I am not the expert. And one of the main things about team coaching is that what I give to them is a presence. And they learn how to use that presence. I don't tell them, I may ask them, but it's not necessarily I ask them as individuals, I ask them about the processes that are going on within the team. Now, because we're here to talk about Belbin and not team coaching, this is where Belbin really comes in handy. And I introduced this early on in the whole process because they learn 2 things, 2 basic things. First of all, they learn something about themselves. And because Belbin is not a psychometric test, it's not getting inside of your head, it's about how you tend to behave when you work with others. And I can guarantee that when they get the Belbin reports and we start to read through them, there's another look of shock and horror on their faces. And they say, that's just like me. How did they know this? So, Joe, as I've seen it, I have to tell them about the box with the magic fairy dust in that sits in the corner of the Belbin office.
Absolutely.
It's all worked out in there, guys. At which point they all leave the course. So we introduced Belbin to them, and it's like, wow. But the other wow factor is that they then look at the other guys that they've just met in the last week or so, and they understand a little bit about them. And hopefully, depending on the size of the group, not team at this stage, on the size of the group, there is difference. There's also gaps, just as we have today on the chart behind you. There's some big gaps there.
Them, yeah.
Don't ask me to finish anything.
I know, Chris. I know.
Don't ask me to sit in the corner quietly and read a book. It will not happen. But when they know this about each other, just as with there's some very good replies early on there about what might happen here. We know we need to manage that, Joe. Otherwise, we'd be bashing heads all afternoon, vying to speak. We are here as a mini team with a purpose, which is to talk about Belbin, my role as a team coach. How appropriate is Belbin now? So that is our focus, and we know that we've got to work together in order to achieve that by having a conversation.
Perfect. What I'd like to just say, I know it wasn't perfect. I'm just saying that because I'm trying to be high team worker. I'm not really. No, it was. No, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think as we go through education, we are told what to do.
Yes.
And sometimes when we get into jobs, again, we are told how to be A. And this is the things that we are told. And so it's very rare, I think, that we are able to find out for ourselves. And I think that's quite an enlightening aspect of what you're doing with the team coaching with these students, is you're saying, I don't have the answers. You do somewhere, over to you as a team to be able to do that. But then you need the team to be able to understand itself before it can do that effectively.
Yes, absolutely. Now, this is, I also have, as you know, I have a bit of a beef about the way business support is delivered in general in the UK, in that it is very prescriptive. And it mirrors the education system, the pedagogic approach of the expert and the learner.
Yes, yes.
And this is something that I discovered for myself when I made the transition from poacher to gamekeeper, and Business Link said, come and be a consultant for us. They were sending me into young businesses who were busy setting up, and I'd been through that phase, I'd been on that journey already. And they'd say, what do we need to do next? Yeah. And thinking about it, the way I thought about this was, well, hang on a minute. Actually, I don't know, because I'm not you. I don't know your team. I don't really know the product you're dealing with, which could have been engineering, electronics, recycling, clothing, whatever. And I certainly don't know your customers or stakeholders. So how can I tell you?
Yes.
And this is something that the process of teamwork, the process of learning about teams and being a team coach, this is what's been highlighted, that wherever I go, I'm not the expert. The people are the expert, the team, the coaches, whatever you want to call them, the students. And even with these young learners setting up their own projects and their own businesses for real, and we expect them to make money, I'm not an expert in what they're doing. I may have expertise in some of the processes, and if they want to ask me a particular question about finance, well, fine, I'm not always going to say go and find out, but I always want to know if they've at least looked first.
Yes. Okay. So what you're saying really is that you are there as a resource, but it makes, one of my bugbears, Chris, as you know, is sometimes teams are together and they don't really know why do they need to work as a team? Why is teamwork so important? And what you're kind of saying there is you are showing them why it's so important, because you ain't giving any answers because you haven't got any. And what they need to be able to do is work well as a team to be able to find those answers.
Yeah, and this is this is what's called self-determined learning. So again, we're moving away from the teacher or the lecturer, the expert. And the process, the process is we move from pedagogy to heutagogy through a stage called andragogy. There's some big words for a Wednesday.
I don't know what these words mean, Chris. Come on.
Well, it doesn't matter. So pedagogy is the traditional teacher-pupil approach. Andragogy is in adults. This is where you decide what it is you want to learn. So you decide, you're given a task and you decide what you're going to read about that. But self-determined learning is where you take responsibility for the whole shebang. And you say, right, well, we're here to learn about business, but what's important to me? I'm specifically interested in social media. So we say, right, okay, that's fine. How do you relate that to the project you've got at the moment? So this is what you're talking about why the team is there, which links very nicely with Simon Sinek's work. Mm-hmm. Why?
Why, absolutely.
Every team has to have a why. Mm. So for my guys that I work with at the uni, their why is what's the business all about? Well, they are there to learn and get a degree, that's fine. And what I say to them, which gets me into any amount of trouble with the university, I say, look, guys, you're here to play a game. You're here to play the game of academia, the game of the university. And if you play their game and you do the work that's asked of you and you answer the questions that are asked of you and you complete your personal compendiums and you turn up on time and you submit your work on time and you answer the questions that you're asked, you'll get a degree. How difficult can that be? Oh, right. I said, right. So now that's out of the way, let's focus on your learning and how we're going to get you there.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. And sometimes, you know, it is, isn't it? Are you after just a bit of paper, or do you want people to actually learn how to just, you say something quite regularly, actually, what's it? If the team isn't learning, it isn't effective. That's something I've heard you say on a regular basis.
You know what? So you get a bunch of people working together in an office. That's not a team. Just because people sit together, share an office, that does not make you a team. If you're going to be a team, you've got to have a purpose. You've got to be pulling together. And I think you've also got to be learning. Because if you're learning static, how can you move forwards? If you're learning static, you're always waiting for some expert or some boss to come along and tell you what to do. Now, the way that we work with this in teams, we talk a lot about personal mastery and leadership. And although it is good, it's healthy for any team to have a leader, what I suggest is that leadership in any team can move. Mm. So if the whole team knows what it's there to achieve, which stakeholders it's there, which purpose it's there to serve, everybody should know what the team needs to, well, what does success look like? What will success look like? I'm just considering the 9 team roles. So if the team needs to be moving somewhere and nothing's happening, then according to Belbin, and according to certainly my experience, what needs to happen? So the shaper needs to come to the fore. Right, guys, let's get the, and that is not a cigarette, I believe it's a whip. So the whip needs to come out and we need to see some action. But if it's all action and there's no thinking, it's going to be a hollow response. So at some point, the specialist, for example, can stand up, or the monitor evaluator can stand up and say, guys, can we just calm this down a bit? You're dashing ahead here and we really haven't thought this through. What I propose is we take tomorrow morning. They've taken leadership of the process. So within the process of a team, the leadership has to move.
Depending on what the team's doing at the time.
Absolutely. Mm. And if the team can't move, it's not learning.
I think you put that really succinctly, Chris. I really like that. And I think sometimes that's something we find that people have used Belbin in an academic sense. And they said, right, so these are the roles that you need. This is where it fits. Right, job done. And it's not job done. It's not a tick box exercise. It's about using it to help that team grow. And by growing and learning, it's actually going to be more effective.
Absolutely. Now, this is where I think a lot of a lot of consultants miss out. And I know people who say, oh yes, we take Belbin to our clients. And I say, great, what do you do with it? And they run a workshop and walk away. And I'm thinking, well, fine, and it's like, that's it, Belbin has been delivered. They're missing a huge opportunity because it needs somebody. Belbin is not, it is a snapshot, but it's not a snapshot. It's a snapshot you add to the album to move forwards with. And as projects evolve, as the requirements of stakeholders change, as companies evolve, so the teams should possibly change as well. And if you just go along and do Belbin and say, there are your team roles, and expect to see change and difference, yeah. And even if you add in a little bit of Lencioni, that's fine. But you've got to start them on the journey because it is a learning journey. And in delivering team roles, the individuals find out something about themselves, but what about, and I always advocate this, you know, in a traditional office structure, the way there isn't a boss, even just a notional boss, the team need to know what are the preferred team roles of their boss. What if their boss does not have the shaper profile? Yeah. They may need a bit of a nudge from time to time.
Absolutely, there's no problem with that in this office, but it's true, isn't it? Because how do you best manage your boss? Because it's not just because of the relationship necessarily, but it's because they could be the ones who are the controller of the project going forward.
Yep.
And if they're not playing the roles that they need the project needs them to do, that could be quite detrimental. So you're taking ownership as the team and saying, look, manager, it looks like we're slipping behind a little bit here. What can we do collectively to speed things up a bit? And knowing that your manager, your boss may not have shaper is really crucial with that conversation.
Yes, it is. And if this is the other thing that we move forwards on with the teams that we work with, I was having a wonderful conversation with a guy in Finland last week, one of the sort of founding fathers of Team Academy, if you like. And we were talking about how easy we all find it to work on an international basis, because the Team Academy network is global, and regularly we meet up with people from Peru or Finland, South Korea, South Africa, right across Europe. And we can have webinars like this, we have breakout groups. Sometimes we get together to work on a particular issue because we're always looking to develop best practice in teamwork, team coaching. And what Heike says is it's all down to dialogue. Now, when we talk about dialogue with teams, it's not about how, this isn't dialogue, we're chatting. Dialogue is a really deep dive. It's a deep dive conversation where you talk about the difficult things. And somebody asked me on another forum a month or so ago, as a coach, what is the best tool you have in your toolkit? Thinking I'm going to produce a pack of cards or Belbin or something like that. And I said, silence. What? And some of the best changing in thinking and the best learning I've seen within the sort of the scope of the team is when you hold them to silence over a topic they're finding difficult. And that awkward silence where nobody wants to speak. Now for the consultant or the teacher or the shaper, you want to get in there and give the answer. Well, I think we should do this. And because one of the things about true dialogue, and there's all sorts of, well, there's not all sorts of, there's a good sort of academic stuff you can quote here, Isaac's dialogue diamond. And it's about respecting, it's about listening. It's about being silent and holding that silence and holding the discomfort in the room is something else that we do in order to get the learning going and dealing with. So when, yes, if you've got the boss involved, conversations with the boss can sometimes be uncomfortable. If you're going to work as a team and your boss is part of that team, you need to be able to have those very pragmatic, matter of fact, no holds barred, no grudges taken conversations. That's dialogue.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say anything now. I don't know if we're meant to be having one of these silences, Chris. And I think that's true, because it's what Meredith talks about very much in actually management teams, which I've reread recently again and keep finding gems. And it's not necessarily about just understanding the contribution you are making, but also learning when to make it. And that's quite crucial because, for example, you said there, you know, somebody may want to fill in the gap. It's also knowing when not to fill in the gap, when
Absolutely.
other people need to be there.
Yeah.
So it's not just about this is who I am. It's not just about that. It's knowing when to play that role appropriately for the benefit of the team.
Apparently, the essence of good comedy is timing.
Apparently so, Chris.
And one of the when I was doing my team coach training, which is a journey I'll never finish, by the way, but when I started my team coach training, one of the things that we were told, because there are certain things you've got to sort of, that are givens, and a piece of advice I was given was, when you're working with a team, if you feel you should challenge, then don't. When you don't feel you should challenge hard. And that's, my face probably looked like yours.
Yeah, I'm just trying to work that one through at the moment, yes.
When I first heard that. And sometimes when we hear the obvious and you want to jump in and either challenge them or give them an answer,
yes,
you don't. You let them sit with the discomfort of not knowing, because that's where the learning is. And again, this is where Belbin fits in so perfectly, because when you don't know, you can think, oh, well, hang on, do I have a specialist in this team? They're not here today. This is why the team doesn't know. Yes, does that make sense?
It does, but I'm just really conscious of these spaces now and these gaps and the silence. I'm feeling really conscious that I don't know if I should fill them or interrupt. My goodness, you've got me on the back foot here. This doesn't normally happen.
No, this is, it's fine. This is a discussion. This is a webinar. This is a conversation. We need to keep the chat going, but a lot of people are uncomfortable with silence.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put my hand up to that one, actually. In fact, I would say the best things that have happened to me personally is when I've actually been able to zip it and sit back. Yeah.
There's a Canadian guy called Harold Yarkey who writes a lot about total knowledge management. And he says that we all need to be cured of the disease of telling.
I think he's got something there, most definitely. Now, I just want to tell you, actually, we've had a great bit of feedback here from Julia. And she said her clients had an aha moment 2 weeks ago when she showed them the slide of using the right Belbin team roles at the right stages of a project. Obviously, which they have to define the project, because we just give a rough guide. And then they said, right, and now they're doing one-to-ones with each of them. And now they're just wanting more, because I think they've seen the relevance. And I think, Chris, this is what happened to you, wasn't it? You came onto a training session, however many years ago it was now, and it was the fact that it was turning the theory into the action. It was that transition which was really important. Yeah,
and I'd never, although I'd known of Belbin for all of those years, I'd never experienced it. And I think this is the thing. It's not just something, it's not a badge you stick on somebody. It's good fun when you do a training session and everybody gets the badge. Oh, look, I'm this, I'm that. Oh, you're one of those. But it's not about that. It's not about that at all.
So I'll just interrupt there. Julia also said that they're a bunch of accountants, which I quite like. That's an important ad, I think, Julia. Thank you very much.
Yes, they're doubly doomed, Julia. Be gentle with them.
Oh dear, love it, love it. So, okay.
I was just going to say I've actually had some quite not unkind, uninformed comments when if I bring Belbin up in conversation, sometimes say, oh, well, let's start with Belbin. Oh, yes, but Belbin, it's so old. And I'll say, well, yeah, but what do you know about it? When did you last use it? Oh, we did that years ago. You did that years ago, but you're not using it now. And I think people often look for more whiz-bang, flashy, psychometric, involved, complicated solutions that some consultants will hide behind because they are complicated, and that makes the consultant the specialist in that case, the expert. Whereas, just as Julia illustrated there with the accountants, the solution is so simple, it's so sweet. And that's the, the Belbin project management, who to bring in at which point in the project. It's such a simple process, but it works.
Absolutely. No, it does work. We see it working time and time again. The other thing I know that you do with your students, to go back to that, is that you don't just talk about self-perception. You get people, because you have to start with yourself. We have to understand ourselves and our strengths and our weaknesses. So we have to understand how we think we have preferences for all of these 9 team roles. But then we need to get feedback from others, don't we? Because we could be labouring under a false assumption, perhaps.
Yeah, we could. And again, when delivering Belbin, it's interesting to do it with just the self-perception inventory. But if you're going to work with a team, if you're going to deliver this to a group, and I also use, as you know, Joe, I use GetSet with learners, young learners in senior school, who are making a transition between senior school and university, the world of work. And where the fun starts, where the magic starts, is when you do the 360s, is when you do the observer assessments. And especially with everybody's bête noire is the list of words at the end.
Yes.
And the words in italic may be perceived. And they'll find the one person, and I say, yeah, that's great. Why do you think they might have said that about you? Why would anybody suggest that you were over talkative?
How dare they? How dare they? And for those of you who don't know, this is really a useful way of seeing, is you fill in the self-perception, how you see yourself, you get your report back, but then you ask people who know you well and you trust. And I think, trust within a team is a whole different conversation, isn't it? An important one. And you ask them to feedback on how they see your behaviours within a team. And all they have to do is tick some words. And they tick list A words of all the positives for all the team roles, and list B are all the weaknesses for the team roles. And the ones which are weaknesses come up on this report in italics, and you can see perhaps the potential proportion of strengths and weaknesses that they are seeing. One of my top italicised words, Chris, is manipulative. Which it's not. I
don't believe it.
But everybody always does what I want them to eventually. No, that was a joke. So it's very interesting from that point of view. Now, what I'd love to know, Chris, is what do you think, how the world is now changing. That's a bit of a glib statement. We're working more virtually. This is going to be the norm. How do you think Belbin can help there? Where is the role of Belbin, do you think, in this new virtual world and the future of teamwork? So that's a big question, isn't it? I'm just interested in your views.
I shall just reflect. The future of Belbin. Yeah, well, is this the new norm? It is a new norm. I think we've learned a lot being immersed in the disruption that COVID-19 has caused, is causing, and will continue to cause. Such disruption has been talked about and predicted for a long time. And we're all told that we live in this VUCA environment, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Yes. And it's getting worse. The frequency of disruption is increasing. The rate of disruption, the size, the amplitude of the disruption is changing and increasing all the time. So is Belbin still as relevant as it was 25, 30 years ago? Yes, it is. Because if let's just suppose that everything's going to go online, and a lot of people are now querying, why do we have these lovely offices, Joe? It's so you can escape.
I need it. You for sanity.
Yeah. Yes. But why do we have these expensive offices, especially in the city? We've got these expensive offices full of people who have to spend 5 hours a day traveling just to get here and back. What effect does that have on their well-being? A lot of people who are now furloughed or working from home are finding that they're more productive because they don't have this great chunk of the day taken up by traveling. So what if we are going to work from home more? People are already interviewing online. Well, for all I know, you could be an axe murderer. How can I find out? So I think moving forward with Belbin in a virtual world is just as effective because it's about behaviour, it's not about personality. So how do people work together virtually? And I would suggest, by what I've seen and what I know with my teams, I don't see any change in the team roles. And I think that the thing that they still give us are the conversations that we need to be having as teams. Mm. So if you've got a virtual team, are you going to give, or if you give the monitor evaluator, for example, a job to do, and say you want it by Tuesday, are you going to be surprised why you haven't got it the following Thursday? Because they're busy, painstakingly making sure everything's in place.
Mm. See, I'd argue, Chris, actually, to say that it's even more important virtually, because I think we can get away with a lot more when we're not in the office. You haven't got those social cues. And to be able to understand why person X hasn't done something is crucial. It's to understand, well, actually, it's not because they're disengaged. It's not because they're not working. Again, this whole psychological safety. It's not because they haven't understood. It's because I know that they're a really strong monitor, evaluator, completer, finisher. And I know that they need time to be able to make the right decisions, and they're going to be really looking at the detail there. Now, if I know that, I can manage that. The rest of the team can manage that. And I think it's important because I think some of the more, we've got the more thinking team roles can be seen as not being as visible. And when people aren't visible, I'm finding online, people start questioning, well, where are they? What are they doing?
Yes, and something else as well, which is a bit of a red herring. When I think a lot of us have assumed that working virtually is fine. It is up to a point. But when you put a team in a room, that's when the magic happens. And the team members who are now working remotely are working in different environments. When you work together as a team, you share that environment. So you hear people talking about the buzz in the office. Mm-hmm. Do you get that same buzz online? I'm not sure that you do. It's nice to see people when you click onto a Zoom call and there are 20 happy smiley faces there who you all know. It's lovely. But it's not the same buzz as if you all walk into a room and share a cup of coffee or share a drink together. So there are other considerations that we're not fully aware of yet.
Yeah, and I think only time will tell, won't it? It's the full implication there. And again, we're seeing this very much, is it some of the social roles who are missing that buzz, but actually some of the action roles, I know one of our programmers, he's loving it, he's never got so much work done because he's not being interrupted by, the resource investigators. Here's a really high implementer, completer, finisher, and he can just get on at his boat and just get it done without me saying, oh, can we do this? Can we do that? And he's loving it. So again, how people, their behaviours, what they tend to do, how they interact with others also influences and informs how we're working virtually. I'm just going to open up now. If people want to start typing any questions that they may have for you, Chris. How difficult is teamwork? I'm just going to start there. In your experience, does it come naturally or not?
No, very rarely. I was thinking about this morning actually, because I've got a meeting with a guy who is a sports team coach. And we were both commenting on a forum online, and he made a comment which was it just didn't fit. And somebody else queried this and said, how do you think that your form of coaching fits with team coaching? And I thought, ooh, that's okay, there's a challenge. So anyway, I started a conversation with him. We're going to meet up. We've never met before, but we're going to meet up on Thursday and just have a chat about this. Sorry, I've derailed myself a little bit there.
How rare is teamwork? How difficult is it?
Yes, sorry. So my point was, yes, because he's from the world of sport, I was thinking about this morning, and when we see sports teams coming together, they're hand-picked, they are pampered, they're trained, they're coached in different ways, and they work together as a team. So what I see with the teams that I work with is that in some instances of Team Academy, especially in Finland where it's got its genesis, you apply to do the degree course at Pro Academia, and you're then interviewed for the process. And as you now know, they are now using Belbin as part of this process, and they choose the people who are going to come and learn with them.
Oh, the luxury. Oh, the luxury.
What a luxury. Fantastic. In the real world, what happens is we are presented with a group of young people who have found out that our degree course doesn't have any exams and doesn't have any lectures. And they think, yeah, 3 years drinking. No. That misconception is killed within minutes. Sometimes it is incredibly hard. That doesn't mean that it's not worthwhile, because when it comes together, it can be incredibly sweet. But this is why Lencioni says, teamwork is so difficult and so rare. This is why you don't find high-performing teams. People talk about, oh yes, we've got a high-performing. I build high-performing teams, really, because who are the people? Katzenbach and Smith, Wisdom of Teams. Yes. They talk about the process of team building and how you go from pseudo team to high-performing, and you kind of go through this Death Valley process. There's going to be struggle, and I get young lads sometimes. Young lads, 19, 20, 21, distraught because they cannot make this thing work. And quite often it's about a mismatch or a misunderstanding of relationships within the team. And most usually we can resolve it. They can resolve it.
Absolutely. If you leave enough silence there, Chris, they will be able to resolve it because they've got the answers. They just need to know where to look for them. And I think it's true, isn't it? I think team is a word that's bandied around. We've had many conversations about this. It's not teamwork, just people being in a room together.
No.
It needs to be the objective. They need to know their why. There needs to be small as well. Sometimes we talk about teams and the numbers are ridiculous. But teamwork is hard, and it's a constant. It's not I've been on a team building workshop, tick. It's something like Julia's doing, like you're doing, like I know quite a few accredited people do. It's that constant learning of a language, because you don't learn French, get a GCSE and go, I can speak French.
Absolutely.
You have to go over to France and you have to blink and use it on a regular basis to be able to keep yourself understanding and to use it effectively.
I was trying to think of something to say in French there, but I'll not. Mais oui.
Mais oui, yeah.
Yes, and another good example of that is mindfulness. And this is something that's used a lot in coaching practice, but you can't just go on a mindfulness course and then say, oh yes, I've got I do mindfulness.
Yes, exactly.
You've been introduced to it. It's like you could go on a, do you want to speak Portuguese course? And if you like the sound of it, I could learn more about that, and the culture looks interesting. I'd like to travel to Portugal when we can actually get flights there. And so
you've got to keep
introducing people to Belbin, it is an introduction, but then what are they going to do with that? Yeah. Like having a lovely bottle of perfume, it might look very nice sat on the shelf in the bedroom, but unless you dab it on, spray it on, whatever,
it's not going to be effective, is it?
No.
Right, Chris, I'm going to interrupt you now because we've got some questions coming in.
Oh, no.
I know. Does the Belbin model relate to social intelligence? If yes, how? I think that's going to be quite a potential long answer to that one, David. So if you don't mind, I might park that and answer it in depth, unless you've got a quick answer to that one, Chris.
No, I haven't, because in order to what is the definition of social intelligence? It's like saying, does Belbin relate to emotional intelligence? I would say yes, it does, but at what level? What part does it play? So yes, it does. It certainly promotes a level of social intelligence within a group of people or a community. Absolutely.
Perfect, thank you. And I think it is, isn't it? It's quite a far-ranging area, but we can get back to that. What was the source of that theory of team building about a roller coaster that Chris mentioned? Katzenbach and Smith, I can answer that one. The wisdom of teams. Have you got your copy there?
It just so happens.
Oh, have
There we
you?
go.
If anybody was to read anything that wasn't management teams, obviously, or team roles at work, this I can recommend. I love this book. And it talks about how difficult it is. It talks about self-managed teams. It talks about how everybody has to feel part of the process and how we need to help each other out within a team. Because unless we help everybody develop and be their best contribution that they can possibly make, then there's no point. So it's all about this sort of self-coaching, isn't it? And self-managing teams as well. It's brilliant.
Not many pictures though.
No, there's not, is there? Quite disappointing. I've got really large text in mine, so it's okay. Not every situation, task, challenge requires a team to achieve it. Absolutely no, it doesn't. The effect of trying to create a team when it isn't needed is draining and damaging to all concerned.
Yeah, because the team have no purpose, so it probably wouldn't come together. No. There'd be a nice bunch of people drinking tea and eating biscuits and having a chat. Yeah, I think there's sometimes a few years ago it seemed that everything had to have a team to be everybody was part of a team. In fact, very often you just need a talented individual, or you really just need a twosome. Meredith really feels strongly about the benefits of a twosome, but not just any twosome, not just our twosome, especially if you can look at different roles and what, you know, it depends what obviously you're there to do, because some roles would be more useful than others at that time. But absolutely, I think if we constantly keep going to teams and meetings, everybody just feels shattered. Team has to have a task.
You've got to have a task. You've got to know what you're there for. And you know, it could be that just one or two people. Absolutely. Let's not overuse teams. Teams are not needed for everything. Okay, I think that's about it. I have a problem here because I can't wear my glasses because they get in the way of the headset and then I can't read particularly well. But I think we've covered most of them there. Chris, what I'm going to, can you see any? I think that's got there. Chris, thank you for joining us. As always, it's been quite far-ranging. I think the work that you're doing at Team Academy is fascinating, and I'd recommend anybody to go and look up Team Academy and see what they do. I love the whole concept of the idea that the team has to be learning to be effective, and the fact that they're not learning just from an expert who's plonked in the middle because apparently they know what they're doing. It's something that you allow them to do themselves. The team needs to go on its own journey to understand what it needs and what it already has within them. But the fact that it needs to start with valuing difference and that we're all going to be bringing different things into that team, and that's where Belbin can really play a part and help with this conversations, help with the dialogue and everything else, and how Belbin as well can help in a virtual environment and going forward with that. Is there anything you'd like to say to wrap things up, Chris?
Two things. One I got away with before, but you were saying about sort of the level of personal, I call it personal mastery, and one of my favourite quotes, which I keep going back to, is from, it's the Sun Tzu Art of War thing. If you know yourself and you know the enemy, in 100 battles you need never fear the result. And that's probably one of the things I do quote to my young learners, and say, you've got to understand yourself first. Before you engage in any process and anything, you've got to understand what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with, what you're capable of, what you're not capable of. And at a practical team level, Belbin's a really good way of beginning to establish that. The other thing, and we can go full circle here because I mentioned at the beginning the Deloitte quote that organizations of the future will be governed by networks of teams. And there's lots of other work suggesting that, that suggests that the traditional hierarchical way in which organizations and society itself is structured, it's just not working as well as it used to. So the power of teams isn't just that each team is insular, and within larger organizations, the real power and the learning power comes when those teams begin to network and interact and share the learning between one team and another. So just quickly going back to the accountants that were mentioned before, within that accountants practice, if there are different teams, those teams are unique. Their learning is unique. Their stakeholders, the clients, could be unique. If they share that, then they multiply the knowledge, they'll multiply the learning. And a lot of organizations are missing out big style by waiting for advisors to come in and tell them what to do, when all along they have a better answer locked within their teams, and it just needs to be unlocked. That's my job.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you. If anybody would like to discuss any of this, or just find out a little bit more about Chris, he said please do contact him on LinkedIn. You're under Chris Jackson. Does it say Merchant Adventurer? I'm not entirely sure.
I don't think it does.
No, I don't think it does. But please do contact Chris on that. It's been a delight, and thank you very much for joining us, Chris. And we didn't go quite as far ranging as we normally do, but I don't know if that's necessarily a good or a bad thing. So thank you so much for that.
Pleasure, Joe.
And take care, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon. Bye.